I would like to call this meeting to order. This is the San Francisco Elections Commission regular meeting. Today is Wednesday, October 21st, 2020. It is now 3:09 p.m. We are meeting remote via WebEx. Would you, Secretary, or I forgot how we're calling each other, but would you actually please read out loud the kind of the instructions for the public on public comment?
Okay. Thank you, Madam President. The minutes of this meeting will reflect that due to the COVID-19 health emergency and to protect commission members, city employees, and the public, the meeting rooms of City Hall are closed. However, commission members and staff will be participating in today's meeting remotely. This precaution is taken pursuant to the various local, state, federal orders, declarations, and directives. Commission members will attend the meeting through WebEx video conference and participate in the meeting to the same extent as if they were physically present. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Comments or opportunities to speak during the public comment periods are available via phone call by calling 1-408-418-9388. Again, the phone number is 1-408-418-9388. Access code is 146-860-4563. Again, 146-860-4563, followed by the pound sign, and then press pound again to join as an attendee. You will hear a beep when you're connected to the meeting. You will be automatically muted and in listening mode only. When your item of interest comes up, dial *3 to raise your hand and be added to the public comment line. You will then hear you have raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait until the host calls on you. The line will be silent as you wait your turn to speak. Ensure you are in a quiet location before you speak. Mute the sound of any equipment around you, including television, radio, or computer. It is especially important that you mute your computer if you are watching via the web link to prevent feedback and echo when you speak. When the system message says your line has been unmuted, this is your turn to speak. You will hear staff say, "Welcome caller." You are encouraged to state your name clearly. As soon as you begin speaking, you will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment. 6 minutes if you are on the line with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you change your mind and wish to withdraw yourself from the public comment line, press *3 again. You will hear the system say you have lowered your hand. Once your 3 minutes have expired, staff will thank you and mute you. You will hear your line has been muted. Attendees who wish to speak during other public comment periods may stay on the line and listen for the next public comment opportunity and should raise their hands to enter the public comment line by pressing *3 when their next item of interest comes up. Public comment may also be submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to elections.commission@sf.org. That's elections.commission@sfgov.org. Thank you, Madam President.
And can you please call roll call?
Okay. 1 second, I'm sorry. Okay, Lucy Bernholz?
Here.
Charles Jung?
Here.
Viva Mogi?
Here.
Jill Rowe?
Here.
Chris Jordanic?
Here.
And Roger Donaldson.
Here finally.
All right, thank you.
Welcome. You made it on time.
Right.
So we have met quorum.
Awesome. Okay, item number 2. Public comment. This is general public comments. Public comments on any issue within the Elections Commission general jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda.
The Elections Commission is now receiving public comment on agenda item number 2. Fine.
They need to press *3 to queue up if they have a comment. We have one right now.
Okay, caller, you have 3 minutes.
All right. My name is Mike Zubis. Do I need to give my address?
No, just your name. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure. Okay. I will start now. To the esteemed Election Commission of the City and County of San Francisco, I wish to discuss a recent event. That being Gavin Newsom's veto of a bill brought to him through the legislature, which is allowing other forms of voting methods, specifically ranked choice voting, to be allowed to be used in cities across the state easier. The reasoning was, as Governor Newsom put, ranked choice voting is an experiment that has been tried in several charter cities in California. Where it has been implemented, I am concerned that it has often led to voter confusion and that the promise that ranked choice voting leads to greater democracy is not necessarily fulfilled. Gavin Newsom was not correct when he described RCV as an experiment, maybe within the state and the DNC primary in 5 states this year, but not as a voting method in general. RCV was invented in 1855 and reached acceptance in various parts of the globe and parts of the USA. Some nations are Australia, Ireland, and India, as well as the American cities of Minneapolis, San Francisco, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, who themselves have been using it since 1912. And that's not even considering that most armed service members also use RCV for the ballots overseas, which begs the question, if everybody else has been using it for years, why is it an experiment here? For 2 reasons. The first reason is the blanket primary the state has. It was a solution to the problems first past the voting pretty much has. It didn't fix the problem because the primary is the problem. This allowing 2 candidates of any party to get through means that the Democrats or Republicans can run a bunch of candidates, and if 2 of them win, the Democrats win, giving people less choice in the general election, thus defeating the purpose of changing the primary system. The second reason is the only reason why Gavin Newsom became mayor was due to avoiding all RCV altogether. If this first election was our RCV election, the possibility of another person winning a majority was higher. But because it was not, Gavin Newsom won about 40% of the vote, which was still not a majority. RCV is also known as IRV, instant runoff voting. But here, a runoff was needed. So the entire Democratic establishment suddenly came out stumping for him, giving him a large majority of the runoff vote, allowing him to become part of the Nancy Pelosi political machine, and as such, the powerful man that he is. I call for an override of that veto, not because Democrats will lose, but because the Californian people will win, as the election process is made easier, allows for more candidates, which was proven by Minneapolis, which increased their voter turnout by 50% like clockwork if done correctly. Also, it's not just RCV that's needed. I ask everyone, even Governor Newsom, to go to YouTube and search represent.us Michael Douglas. It's a 10-minute video that describes the problems and solutions needed to fix them. If Cali does what Michael Douglas talks about, then Cali will have a better run state, plain and simple. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers on the line?
That was our last caller queued up.
Okay, great. Public comment is closed. We'll move on to item number 3, open source voting, discussion and possible action regarding open source voting system, technical advisory committee, and status of open source voting project. Commissioner Jordanek, I think we left this item open just in case you were able to follow up on your technical advisory committee item, but just wanted to keep it an open agenda item. So I'll pass it along to you.
Okay, thank you, President Mogi. Appreciate that.
Just a couple of very quick things to report. I was trained on using WebEx by the Department of Technology, so I want to thank their staff for helping me out with that. So I'm going to be scheduling a meeting at some point soon. And then also one of our members is working on updating our results reporter to use the 0 reports that the Department of Elections posted. And I just want to thank Director Arntz for getting that information up online, and along with some of the documentation that he has. So that's where I'm at right now. And so.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you. If there are no comments from other commissioners, I want to take public comment on this item. Hey, let's public comment on item number 3 on open source voting.
Just want to remind them to hit *3 on their phone to queue up for public comment. We have one person queued up.
Okay.
I will unmute them.
Yes, you have, caller, you have 3 minutes.
All right, Mike Zubas here again. This one's a little bit more off the cuff about open source voting. There's been a lot of issues with voting machines in particular, and I feel like it's partially the coding, and it's because, of course, it's closed source, which a lot of people argue that the closed source is required because it prevents hackers. Well, the problem with that is a couple of years ago at this hacking convention called DEF CON, an 11-year-old girl literally hacked through the mock representation of the Florida Secretary of State system and machines and changed votes. So the closed system is part of the issue here, that it's a lot harder to analyze it if there's not as many people available to analyze it. And it's the same problem that Microsoft had when Windows came out. They worked for years, for decades on it. And then a couple years ago, they have this 0-day vulnerability that was found out that when they made the original Windows, somehow there was an error in the closed coding that nobody read until years later when they figured out hackers were exploiting that code in the overall kernel, which is why everybody all of a sudden had to upgrade to Windows 10 because, oops, every version of Windows can be hacked. So it made them, oh, now we got to go 10. But anyways, I just thought that I would highly recommend that the city here looks into this idea, because I think this will be very beneficial for overall election integrity, as people will be able to see the code and tell of the errors, making the code better, as long as people tell the errors and don't exploit them, of course. But that's a double-edged sword of coding altogether. It's easy if you know what you're doing, but even if you type in one letter, it can screw everything up. But that's my gist on it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think we have another caller. Jen?
Yes.
Yeah. You have
Yeah.
3 minutes.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Jen, and my only comment or question about the open source voting advisory committee is whether the meetings, now that there will be future WebEx meetings, whether it will be updated in the GitHub site that the open source voting technical advisory committee currently operate, or will it be under the elections commission website? That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Jordanek, do you want to respond to that, or?
Yeah, sure, I can. Yeah, thank you, Jen, for your comments. Yes, the website will continue on GitHub. It just hasn't been updated yet since we haven't met since the pandemic started. So, my apologies for that, but just keep checking the same spot, and you're welcome to get in touch with me if you want to get updated whenever anything changes. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? Okay, great. Let's move on to public comment is closed, and let's move on to item number 4, Redistricting Task Force Committee. Discussion regarding appointment of members to the Redistrict Task Force Committee for 2021-2022 pursuant to Charter 13.110 and related matters. I know Commissioner Rowe has to go, but we still have you for 5 minutes. So if you can maybe kick us off, and then I may lean on Deputy City Attorney Shen to kind of follow through, and we can have this discussion.
Sure. Thank you, President Moogie. So I prepared that memo I sent all of you on Sunday. I believe it's part of the package. And I tried to lay out sort of the background and the kinds of things that you're going to be thinking about when you're making.
Commissioner Rowe, it might only be me, but I'm having a hard time hearing you. You're fading in and out on my end.
Yeah, I'm getting just bits of your.
Well, I don't know if there's a way to fix that. I'll try to speak a little closer to my computer. Is that any better? No, it's not. Well, I don't think I can call in for this.
Are you able to get any closer to the computer where the microphone is?
This is as close as I can get. Why doesn't, I'll tell you what, hopefully this is a little bit better. This is literally as close as I can get. And I will try to project. I'm sorry if I sound like I'm angry. I did prepare this memo on October 18th that I sent to the commissioners, and that should be attached to the agenda packet. And I tried to lay out the background and the procedures and the considerations that the commission will have to think about when it's making its appointments for this. We do have some time. I did my best estimate of when we need to do things in order to be on the completely safe side and not get caught behind the 8-ball. And at the end of the memo, I gave my recommendations with respect to, how you should get through the process. I think I mentioned to everybody that I term out at the end of this year. So unless I have a short holdover period, you will be taking this on without me. But my recommendation for today's meeting was that we vote on the minimum criteria for the appointees, and then select one commissioner to draft the guidelines that will be posted in terms of, letting people know of the position and that we're accepting applications. And then in the memo, I laid out what I think we should do at the November meeting, and then at subsequent meetings. Some of this was pushed forward a little bit so that I can stay involved in these early stages before I turn off the commission. But if you wanted to just do it without me, you could certainly push some of these things back a little bit.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I don't know if the commission has had a chance to review the memo, but I would like us to just kind of review it. And then also, I think a great next step would be to hear your thoughts on the recommendation, and then we can kind of take next steps from there. But any initial thoughts from the commission about? Yes, Commissioner Vice President Bernholtz.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank Commissioner Rowe for doing this. This is incredibly helpful. I did spend a bit of time with the memo today. I do have some questions or suggestions about criteria, if that's what President Moogie wants us to go to now. I also really appreciate the effort to make the timeline such that we'd have Commissioner Rowe's expertise while she's still on the commission. So if you want that specific question I have about the criteria, I'm ready to ask that question. Now's the time.
Yeah, let's go into the actual document, but actually let's first start if there are any questions on the document or need some clarification. If not, then we can go on from and actually kind of dive into the document. Commissioner Jordanek.
Thank you. I've just got one question, and maybe the Deputy City Attorney can answer this. Do we know when we make our selection, are any of the other members of the task force going to be known to us? For example, for ensuring diversity, or is it all simultaneous?
Good afternoon, everyone. So I think last time around it was more or less simultaneous. I think the Elections Commission was one of the earlier ones back in 2011. but there's no hard and fast rule about who goes first or who goes last. So if you do have a preference, you could certainly try to shift around a little bit. But there is no requirement that there's a specific order in how the appointments take place in terms of the commission and then the board and then the mayor. But last time it was all around the kind of the same neighborhood of time.
Okay, thanks.
Great. I don't see any other folks with questions. Oh,
I apologize. I have to jump off for
Yeah.
another call that I couldn't avoid. I will come back afterwards, but I suspect it'll be done. So sorry about that.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you for this, Commissioner Rowe. This is really helpful.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Vice President Bernholz, let's kind of then go into the actual document.
Great, thank you. So I'm looking at the 2011 minimum criteria for applicants, which is on page 3 of the memo. And I find these to be significantly more robust than the previous, a decade earlier. As I reflect on this now, thinking about where we are, I'm wondering if there's opportunity to or reason to consider that these same sort of restrictions on engagement in the political process within the city and county might or should be extended to include restrictions on participation at the state, or I wasn't actually thinking national level, but my concern here is actually that the role that the two major political parties have played over time in redistricting leads me to think that while I'm very much in favor of, example, the restriction on not currently a direct hire of an elected official in San Francisco has not been paid by any political campaign in the last 5 years. I'm just wondering if for that last one, number 6 and number 8, that limits it to the city, if we might consider extending that up to include roles at the state level, trying to make sure that the political parties are kept as removed from the process as possible.
So can I just get, you want less involvement in political activities on a local, state, and federal level?
Yes. What I'd like to do is, I'm interested in the other commissioners' opinions on whether that would, I'm interested in protecting this task force from the interests of the two major political parties in the country. And so I'm wondering if elevating those restrictions on their participation might get us there. I'm also open to other strategies, or if people think that that's an unnecessary level of concern, I'm open to that, hearing that opinion, although I would argue that redistricting is a primary strategy of both major political parties, and that protecting the independence of this task force is a primary concern to me.
Do you mind if I weigh in, President Mogi, with just a brief bit of background?
Yeah, that would be the best.
Yeah, and I apologize. I know that you probably already had this discussion last time around, but just to be clear, I mean, the mission and task, well, the goal before this task force is that they are just redrawing local supervisorial district lines. So they don't have any effect on congressional district lines or other political divisions, other, again, than just between the 11 districts that constitute our San Francisco Board of Supervisors. So just want to make sure that's clear for everyone.
That's very helpful. And in that, you know, it may be that other commissioners feel like the criteria as they stand are protective enough. I'm just raising the possibility.
Commissioner Jordanek?
Yeah, I have a question. Commissioner Bernholz, can you explain more exactly what you have in mind? Because number 3, it says, it seems like it covers what you're talking about, has not been paid by a political campaign in the last 5 years. What was the expansion that you were thinking of?
In particular, I was looking at not currently a direct hire employee of any elected official in San Francisco or the state of California.
I see.
I
Gotcha.
assume that number 6 has no conflict of interest prohibited under the conflict laws applicable to other city officers. I don't know that the conflict of interest law well enough to know off the top of my head that that might encompass this concern. Maybe Deputy City Attorney Shen could speak to that, but I think it's really probably just number 8.
So specifically, like a direct hire of one of our state senators or et cetera. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So, okay.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, actually, go ahead. I was going to.
I just wanted to respond to your question, Commissioner Bernhal. So, in some sense, that criteria did catch my eye because it kind of goes without saying. The members of this task force are city officers, so yes, they will be subject to our conflict of interest laws anyway. But I think in terms of your concern, if that is a line you want to draw, I think it is best done explicitly. So, one wouldn't have to sort of divine or figure out on their own whether that's what the commission is getting at with that criteria. So if you want to make it extend to direct hire of a state elected official or elected official period at any level of government, I think it would be best to just state that if that's what the commission wants to do.
Thank you. So I'm very interested in what other commissioners think.
The extent to which we put these criteria out there, can we apply other criteria beyond these in the selection process? Would there be any prohibition from doing that? Deputy City Attorney Chen.
Yeah, you can go ahead and extend or establish more criteria. And really the function of these criteria is not sort of what's legally required or not, but how best to filter out potential applicants. This is just telling the applicants, here are the things that you need to think about before you put your name in the hat.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, the other people who make appointments to this task force, so the mayor and the board of supervisors, they're probably not going to put any explicit criteria out there. They will just say, hey, we have 3 openings on this body. Let us know if you're interested by this date. And then they'll just sort of fill out their compulsory form and put it in, and then they'll just see what happens. So you don't have to have any criteria at all. But certainly if you want to do it, I think it's just a kind of a good filtering mechanism.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And can I, before we move on here, can I ask, at least on my read, the 2002 minimum criteria and the 2011 minimum criteria appear to be identical in points 1 through 6. And so really all we're talking about in difference is points 7 and 8, which diverge. Are people satisfied with criteria 1 through 6? And can we focus on 7 and 8?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that as well.
I am as well.
Okay, so we're looking at 7 and 8 from both, well, 7 from 2002 and then 7 and 8 from 2011. We can go one by one. Does not reside in the same supervisorial district as any other commission appointee. Seems a little restrictive, so I don't know if folks have an opinion of actually adding that back on or not.
I don't see how that makes logical sense. Following Andrew Shen's helpful comment that this is criteria that we're using to advertise so people can select themselves. How does one know whether one resides in the same supervisorial district as any other commission appointee? That's illogical to me. So I think we discard that. That my guess is that's why they moved to 7 and 8 in the 2011 criteria.
So the 2011, then let's move on. 2011 one says, has voted in San Francisco at least once in the last 5 years.
My only concern with that, I very much appreciate the sentiment of it. However, it would eliminate anyone under the age of 22 2, possibly, right? It would eliminate younger people who might, is that right? Would it possibly eliminate? No, it wouldn't. Never mind.
Well, it would give them a less opportunity.
Right.
Yeah. So if folks have strong opinions that they should have, then yeah, I would like to hear that. But I am actually more of a proponent to be able to have that flexibility, just because, yeah, if you are 18 and above and you didn't have enough time to vote, then that's not your fault, So.
Right.
But it does demonstrate some interest. I mean, if you're 18 and you haven't voted, and and let's say one, I missed it for whatever, perhaps understandable. But if there's not been interest and they've had a number of years of opportunity, if there were, I think that an interest in these political divisions and some understanding of democracy is important. And if you haven't exercised your franchise to vote, that seems like a pretty low bar.
Well, what about to accommodate all the concerns? How about modifying it with a clause? So it'd read, has voted in San Francisco at least once in the last 5 years, comma, we're eligible to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Not to overstep my bounds here a little bit, but I think one consideration the commission may want to think about is that obviously you need to have a certain citizenship status to vote.
Yes.
So I don't think that that may be a concern about not having people different status being in the mix of this task force. That's just something the commission may want to think about.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you need to be a citizen to vote.
Yes.
With some minor exceptions here in San Francisco. So saying that you need to have voted in the last 5 years does in some ways impose kind of a citizenship requirement on members of this task force. So that's something that you may want to consider.
So would voter registration.
Right.
I would want to give as much flexibility if you're a resident in San Francisco, and know your neighborhood.
So does that mean you think that this is not an important criteria?
Yeah, I mean, I also genuinely think people, if they are able to vote, but they can't because of citizenship, but they're applying, there is a strong interest already, but I think we can easily determine that through the application. I don't want us to deter folks from not applying based on their citizenship status.
Then we would have to remove number 1 also.
Which is I'm a voter in San Francisco.
Yes.
Register to vote, yeah. Well, can it say resident of San Francisco?
Can you just remind me, Andrew, Deputy City Attorney Shen, the exception in San Francisco for non-citizen voting does not have to do with the redistricting at issue here, does it? I mean, is there any overlap or relevance?
School board?
I mean, the exception is pretty narrow.
Right. So we allow for non-citizen voting in school board elections here in San Francisco. But for an array of concerns, there's actually been a pretty low registration rate through that program. That just concerns about sort of creating databases of such folks.
Right.
A lot of people haven't registered for that reason.
But that's citywide. My knowledge is that that's a citywide vote. It's not a district by district vote. So, in other respects, so I'm not sure that exception is relevant here. And in other respects, I think being registered to vote and having voted reflects a legitimate public policy concern that people who are interested have to show a minimum interest in voting to care enough about where the boundaries should be drawn. So it's not clear. I mean, I'm all for, kind of flexible criteria, but it seems to me that concern shouldn't swallow the other legitimate public policy concerns that we have.
But just because you're not a citizen doesn't mean that you don't care. And so I'm not really sure what that means. Like you just literally cannot register to vote. So
President, just to ask a question, are you thinking that given that we want diversity, that having somebody that may not be a citizen on such a commission would be, or committee, task force, would be helpful from a diversity standpoint?
I just think it's just more of a, like, if you're a resident here, you work here, or you live here, if you care enough about this, then I wanted to make sure that people can apply. I'm not really thinking through about diversity. I'm thinking more through about just, more enough who we can allow to apply. And, even on the ballot right now, people are moving towards whether or not it wins or loses, like citizenship would not be a criteria to serve on commissions. And so I think, I just feel like we're moving towards that we could just have a criteria that says that if you're a resident in San Francisco, you can apply.
And I apologize if I'm making things more complicated, but the ballot measure that Viva just alluded to, or I'm sorry, President Mogi just alluded to, does bear on this question. So back in 2011, they did have more strict restrictions that you need to be a registered voter to serve on city commissions. And so if that measure is to pass, then I think we have more flexibility here to modify this particular criteria. So it could be a little bit early also to make that call. Obviously, we'll want to see how the election plays out. But I did just want to flag that obviously, there is an overlap between voter registration status and voting history and citizenship status.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So a non-citizen can register to vote in San Francisco, right? It's just that
just for
many people don't. You're just saying many people don't for other reasons.
Exactly.
There's been real legitimate concerns of their own safety under this administration. And so, yeah.
Well, can I ask, is President Mogi, is there another proxy criteria that you can identify that would solve for the same concern? So in other words, that, you want people who, I guess, who don't have that fear and who, are otherwise could have registered to vote and participate in the process by voting. You would imagine, I would imagine that those people are, all else equal, slightly more likely to have the qualifications that we'd be looking for. Is there another way to get at that other than asking whether you registered to vote?
Well, my recommendation was that they're a resident of San Francisco.
But that doesn't really get at the, I mean, if it's not an important criteria in your mind, that's fine. But that doesn't really get at the same issue, that if you're resident of San Francisco and you're otherwise eligible to register to vote and you haven't done either of the latter two things, I would suggest that probably makes you not an ideal candidate for this task force.
I guess I would say that maybe rather than making it a requirement to apply, that we can have criteria that we would take in consideration, and you can ask if you are a resident and not registered. But I don't want people's status to be the determination of whether or not you're more committed to redistricting and about our community.
Then how about something like asking the questions and not expressing them as minimum criteria? Maybe this is where you're going with that, leaving it as it is, and saying, we'll call them criteria for evaluation criteria for applicants. And then if the answer to one registered vote is no, we can allow people to explain why. So if they have a legitimate fear that the Trump administration, or whatever, so if they identify some legitimate fear that would keep them from registering to vote, even if they're eligible to do so, that wouldn't exclude them.
Yeah, if you don't mind a suggestion, I think maybe what we're also trying to get at, I think, is a level of civic engagement on the part of the applicants. So maybe instead of criteria that based on voting history, more about criteria about involvement in community groups or neighborhood organizations or neighborhood associations, local merchants associations. I mean, I think if I'm hearing everyone correctly, I think we want to make sure that whoever it is involved in their community in a serious way. And voting is one way, obviously, to be involved in the community, but there's others to be involved in different groups, whether it's a PTA, whether it's a cleanup crew that goes out every week and cleans up the neighborhood. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to measure civic engagement, so maybe that's another way to go about it.
I think Andrew's right that civic engagement is one proxy, is one thing that we're trying to identify, although I'd say that it's not just civic engagement. It's, to put a sharper point on it, that it's electoral engagement, right? So we want people who care enough to understand the nuances of the differences and where the lines are drawn to see how that would impact electoral engagement.
I guess my where I'm getting stuck is like, because someone can't vote, I mean, they don't care. So like, I'm not talking about folks that choose not to register when they can. I'm talking about people who are like what Andrew mentioned, or a deputy city attorney mentioned, like they have this willingness to be engaged, but they might not have that opportunity to actually vote. And so I just want to make sure we don't have that barrier. And however it is, we can define that. It does put us in a weird position to say, like, if you, cannot vote, then it is there's a clear line. I see that if you are registered vote and you are voting, that you do care a little bit about the electoral work. But if you're not able to vote, I'm not sure how you can prove that, I guess, besides being more civically engaged.
Yeah. So I think to follow on to Commissioner Jung's comments, perhaps if we could put these down, and it could be there could be something else, evidence of civic engagement, such as, or something like that, and then with reviewing for these kinds of criteria, which would not be off-putting to say they are an absolute, you must prove all of these things, but that we're looking for this kind of evidence. So at least the response we would get would be, well, I haven't voted in 5 years because I'm not eligible, but I've been involved in this, that, and the other thing, right? So maybe it has to do with a statement that says, here's the kinds of things we would look at. So it might be the same set of things, but the preamble would basically say that that we want someone with proof of civic, or we'd like to consider people with a proof of civic engagement with these kinds of measures, for example, measures.
I'm also thinking about it from the perspective of whoever is going to be sifting through these applications. You want to, be able to quickly identify those people who, as a body, we think meet the minimum criteria. So just to amplify a suggestion I made, how about whatever minimum criteria we identify, we include a box at the end that says, if you fail to meet one or more of these criteria and still believe you should be considered for the redistricting task force, please identify why. And that will allow them to explain.
I'm open to that. I guess it's a more of a technical question is, I assume it's kind of like, it was like a written application. Okay. So I'm open to that, and just having people just state it. And as someone who read through close to 50 secretary positions, but I was very thoughtful of finding the right one, which we're very happy with. I just wanted to say that, not always, like what was recommended was always, I think that the people that are reading it, if they're applying and if we all take the time to do it, we will find the right and great person or group of people. And so as more information people can share, I think that, this is important enough that I hope the commission would be committed to, not just looking at it as easy as possible to shift through, but like to actually be very thoughtful in reading through all the applicants. If there are, the last one is not currently a direct hire employee of an elected official in San Francisco. I think that is pretty clear. I don't think there should be, I assume, but if there are, then please let me know. And then I assume that the addition we would like to add to this is what Vice President Bernholz is asking for, correct?
Yes, whether or not we would just simply amend it to say, not currently a direct hire employee of an elected official in San Francisco or the state of California.
For the state of California, yeah. Maybe I misunderstood. Did you also mention stuff about political activity, or did you just mean about the direct hire component?
No, my concern is really to distance the task force from people who have engagement in the broader political apparatus of the two major political parties. So eliminating people who are employed by elected officials at any point in the state, I think, gets at some of that.
And so, okay, so your concern is mostly on through employment, receiving that, not people who are politically active.
No, political engagement is fine. I think it also is the item number 3 that prevents them from having been paid by a political campaign weeds out people who are professionally affiliated or obligated in some way to the existing party apparati, if you will. I don't know
Yes.
how better to say it. While also leaving plenty of room for very active community members, which is precisely who we want.
Mm-hmm. I'm open to that, just to add on to San Francisco and I heard state of California. Were there any strong opinions from the commission to remove it or amend it?
No strong opinion.
I'm sorry? Sorry, I spoke over you, so I couldn't hear what you said, Commissioner Donaldson.
Oh, I have no objections to that.
Yeah, I don't either.
I have a question, which is, I think I understand Vice President Bernholz's concern, but it seems to me this criteria really relates to weeding out kind of, it's supposed to set a pretty low floor. As I see it, and it seems to a couple of these criteria deal with conflict, and in particular local conflict. So one, we have kind of eligibility. You in San Francisco, can you attend meetings? Have knowledge of the neighborhoods. Okay, that's helpful. But then these last couple really have to do with, do you have an apparent conflict of interest that would keep you from being objective as we're drawing these lines? And so to me, what the obvious policy consideration that's trying to accommodate is, do you owe somebody something, or do you have a special interest in something local that would keep you from saying, well, the line should be this way or
Mhm.
veer left or veer right.
Right.
And so then to expand it to a state criteria and include that as an exclusion on this minimum floor seems to me a little bit, I'm not opposed to it,
Yeah.
but it seems to me a little bit not consonant with the kind of the policy thrust of those minimum criteria.
And I think you're right. So here's a possibility. What if
Sorry,
a current?
just not to cut you off. I'm sorry. Can you let Commissioner Rowe back in? Sorry, this is a technical thing. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
So Commissioner Jung, I appreciate the way you've just divided those out. I agree with you. I'm imagining a situation, for example, where, say, a current employee of Governor Newsom or one of the state Senate members from the city who has moved through the various levels of elected office. There's often almost a pathway from office here in the city up through the state levels, might be then knowingly or unknowingly a potentially influenceable by political party interests with eyes on the longer term. Admittedly, I'm hypothesizing here. I'm making this up. And if people feel like that the San Francisco restriction is both, it's certainly consonant with the rest of the responsibility, and that extending it to the state is unnecessary, I feel like we've given it good consideration. I appreciate that.
I mean, your kind of hypothesis or story scenario does actually somewhat it is kind of accurate, and so I'm like, again, I'm not opposed to it. I reviewed like even I know it's a little bit more broader in terms of why they would be more restrictive, but someone who would have to serve on the California State Redistricting Task Force, and it was even more strict. Like if you
Sure.
have a family member that was this, then they weren't able to. So unfortunately, my brother wasn't able to even apply. And so like it was like one of those situations where you just never know. And I think that this isn't even a strict criteria. So I'm not actually opposed to adding state.
Now that Commissioner Rowe is back, could I ask her whether perhaps this was addressed when they did this in the past? So the question, Commissioner Rowe, is regarding the 8th criteria under the 2011 minimum criteria, and whether or not it would make any sense, given the nature of party politics at the city and state level and the party's interest in redistricting at any level, whether it would make sense simply to extend that to read is not currently a directory employee of an elected official in California, which would incorporate in San Francisco, so that we're not opening the door, or we're closing the door on the possibility of someone who is an employee, say, of the current governor, I'm just making that up, whose political career moved through the city and could be seen as having ongoing interest in the nature of the district lines in the city. Again, that is a hypothetical scenario. I have no one in mind. You're on mute, Jill.
Is she on mute?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't get my cursor to work. And I was yelling good and loud at the mute button. I don't recall that being discussed, but it was 10 years ago, so I suppose it's possible. And I came in halfway during that discussion, so I may not have heard everything that you said, but I'll tell you my thought on it, and apologize if somebody spoke on this, which is that when you're talking about San Francisco redistricting, you're talking about the supervisor districts, and it's probably just in reality not so much a difference of party as it is of um, certain levels within a party. I mean, let's, so you're not probably talking, just to be frank, you're probably not talking about giving the Republicans an advantage. You're probably talking about giving a more liberal person an advantage or a less liberal person an advantage. And so, and those are things that the task force will look at. But I don't think that the state level issue is as important, because when you think about what this particular task force is doing, you're really talking about what types of groups within San Francisco might you be favoring. And the other point, I think I may have just picked up the tail end of Commissioner Jung saying this, is that if we start interviewing people and there are lots of qualified applicants, we can say, well, we would prefer one who's not the employee of a state official. Just because it's not an absolute criteria doesn't mean we can't use this when we're making our decisions on who to vote in. So that's my view on it. That what I really want to do is make sure we've got people who can understand. These are complicated. This is a complicated process for them. They got to be pretty smart, and they've got to have some knowledge of the city and of demographics and of how voting boundaries can impact certain minority groups. And so I would rather have a larger pool, unless there's some really good reason to exclude them. And then if we're fortunate enough to have lots of qualified candidates, we can start selecting on those kinds of criteria.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Rowe. And, given the responses I've heard to this concern, I'm happy to withdraw the suggestion. I think that's absolutely right. These could be addressed in more detail. And I agree with the positioning of seeking a larger applicant pool and screening out concerns like this one in the process. So.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for your input. It seems like we may make one amendment to it, and then outside of that, we can move on to it seems like we've kind of come to an agreement to the vote on the minimum criteria for appointees. Does everyone feel comfortable with it? Are there any last thoughts on it? If not, then maybe we can make a motion to vote on the criteria.
Well, can you clarify what were the amendments we were going to include in the motion?
I'm maybe again, like what Deputy City Attorney said, it might be a little premature, but maybe we can have that. Is again making it more about, not just about having like option boxes. I guess that's the best way to put it, Commissioner Jung, but just to list out like if you are registered to vote, or if how engaged you are civically and electorally, and then having a kind of like a written box to describe your involvement, so we know that you are involved, because we are not trying to assume that just because you cannot vote doesn't mean that you are not civically or electorally engaged in the process. And so I think I don't know how we would write that out in terms of an amendment, because that is a criteria, but I don't think it's necessarily, I don't know if we want to just then add criterias that we would take in consideration.
Wasn't Commissioner Jung's suggestion that there's a box that said if you do not meet any of these criteria? Is that right, Commissioner Jung?
Yeah, look, I don't feel that strongly about any of this, to be honest. But yes, my suggestion was this: that we keep I thought we'd all agreed on 1 through 6, which we may not have, and that we were talking about 7 and 8 from the 2011 version. And so the one change that I heard was in 7 to add a clause accommodating a commissioner's concern that says has voted in San Francisco at least once in the last 5 years, comma, where eligible to do so. That I think that was to address Commissioner Bernholtz's concern, and then to address President Mogi's concern that we keep registered to vote in San Francisco as a criteria, but that we add a description box, a text box at the end saying words to the effect, if you don't meet one or more of these criteria and believe you should be considered for the commission or committee, please explain why.
And just to clarify, explain why it would have to do with which the criteria you did not meet overall, because if we go down here to the recommendations that Commissioner Rowe provided in what had happened, or at least what happened before, it was a resume and other kinds of things that should demonstrate where there's civic engagement. So to me, having basically something that says, if you do not meet any of these criteria, please tell us which and why not.
Yeah, and we could direct them to make that as part of their statement of interest.
Can I be heard?
Nope.
So again, I'm sorry if I'm jumping in, but I would be opposed to establishing minimum criteria that we say can be waived. I think if we are considering waiving a minimum criteria, we shouldn't make it a minimum criteria. We should exclude it, and then if we want in the guidelines, we can say preference will be given to, but I'm opposed to making the minimum criteria optional and giving us discretion to waive them, because I think that could get us into, accusations that we were playing favorites or something. So I'm opposed to that idea.
Commissioner Bernholtz.
So the specifics that I recall from the previous conversation had to do actually with criteria number 1, that you're registered to vote. And the concern is that there may be residents of the city who are fully qualified to and fully invested in the health and vitality of the city, but are not registered to vote because of their citizenship status, and whether or not we were comfortable with using the voter registration as that first level criteria, and thus removing all non-citizens, some of whom are eligible to vote in the city under the for the school board elections. So just to catch you up on where that came from. And then the second possibility would be to slightly amend what Commissioner Jung suggested. And if there is to be an exception to a minimum criteria, it only be to criteria number 1, and we figure out how to word it such that it's clear, if the commission so deems, that accepting applications from non-citizen residents who are otherwise demonstrating civic and political engagement somehow, if that would be one way to address the commission's interest in doing that.
And let me make a suggestion that just to try to accommodate all these concerns. So focusing on 1, the whether registered to vote, maybe modify that to say registered to vote and comma, or if ineligible, comma, have otherwise demonstrated civic and electoral engagement. And then that way we can keep it as a minimum criteria and accommodate that community that Viva is identifying, President Mogi is identifying.
I think that does a better job of accommodating both interests, because then again, it could be carried forward into the description of what we want in the statement of interest and give them plenty of space to make the case.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
And I'm sorry, just to clarify, did you want the same modification, Commissioner Jung, on number 7? Which is the registered have voted within the last 5 years?
Number 7 is has voted in San Francisco at least once in the last 5 years, comma, where, well, the modification I think accommodates it is where eligible to do so.
Okay, so the same qualifier. Okay, thank you.
It was slightly different, but let me just try to see if I understand what you're saying.
Commissioner Jung, I think you may want to clarify that wording a little bit, because from the discussion, it sounds like if someone is technically eligible to vote in a school board election, we don't want to require that they have done so, right? So maybe say has, you want to say has voted in a non-school board election at least once, unless not eligible, right?
I think the first comment was the number, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Bernholz, I think we're confusing things a little bit, is that if you voted or not was more about younger folks that might have not had the opportunity to vote yet. So like someone who's like just turned 18 or, that want to apply.
Right, that's what brought it to my attention, but I think Deputy City Attorney Shen and Commissioner Jung are absolutely correct. If you're going to modify number 1, you're going to have to modify number 7 as well. To modify to include non-citizen residents. Because either one of them, as written, would exclude non-citizen residents.
Mm-hmm. At the moment, but with the amendment that Commissioner Jung has suggested, I think it does fit.
I mean, the requirement 7 is such a tepid, it's such a weak screening mechanism. I mean, unless you're Shaquille O'Neal, I mean, you've probably, you probably meet it. Do you want to just eliminate number 7? I'm not sure how effective of a screen it is.
And I don't know, are we really going to verify all of these things? The other question.
Well, the application has them state whether they meet it, and if so, I mean, we would check that at the very end of the process.
And if we ask it, we should check it.
Commissioner Rowe, do you recall in 2011 were all of these criteria, after you've selected the slate, were all these criteria validated before they were officially put onto this task force?
No. I mean, yes, I do recall we did not verify it. We asked them to certify it in their application and we took their word for it.
Hmm.
Okay.
I lean towards Commissioner Jung's number 7 criteria to just remove it. But if there are strong opinions for it, then I would ask that commissioner to make a recommendation to amend it.
Again, I think it's a pretty low bar. The only argument that makes sense to me is someone who has just become eligible to vote and is registered. I think the non-resident or the non-US citizen, I think they should be eligible to register to vote minimally in the state of California, not just for school board. So I'm fine with removing 7. I still think it should just say registered to vote in San Francisco.
I think that the reason for number 7 was to avoid people who are new to San Francisco. And I think it was to make sure that, they've been around long enough to at least go through one election. I don't have a problem removing it, but I just wanted to say that I believe that was the purpose for for that criteria being added. Yeah, that one was not in the 2002, so it was added in 2011, and I think it was to make sure somebody had been around. I mean, realistically, somebody who is going to apply for this task force, which is a lot of work, is going to be civically engaged. I'm not worried about picking up somebody who didn't bother to vote. That doesn't seem plausible to me. And somebody who's brand new to the city wouldn't probably have general knowledge of the neighborhoods and geography, so maybe that's a little bit duplicative. So I guess I'm saying I'm okay with deleting that one.
Anyone else? Commissioner Bernholtz? Your
No,
hand.
nothing
Okay.
to add. Oh, my hand is stuck. Sorry, that was old.
It's stuck. It's stuck.
Stuck
Yeah,
up.
it's stuck. Okay. So it sounds like we're okay with removing number 7, and I think we are still in conversation about number 1. I have a strong opinion about actually just again also it's going to determine the tone of things, even how even city commissions will operate based on this ballot measure. And so I'm just I want us to have an open mind. I don't want us to just say if you're registered to vote is what would qualify you to be part of this commission, I mean this committee or not.
And with the intention of being inclusive of non-U.S. citizens as well as newly of age. Is that correct? Both?
Well, if you're newly of age and you are eligible to vote, I hope that you would register to vote, but
that's my point.
Yes. Was to have people who are not eligible to vote, but have been civically and electorally engaged to be able to have the opportunity to apply.
What if we changed number 1, instead of saying registered to vote in San Francisco, we say civically or electorally engaged via voting or otherwise?
Or demonstration of civic engagement, such as being a registered voter or San Francisco or other demonstrable activity.
You know, the other thing we could do is delete it all together, and in the application process, ask them to tell us what kind of civic or electoral engagement they've had.
Commissioner Jordanek?
Yeah, I liked the wording that I think Commissioner Jung suggested earlier, saying register to vote, and if not, explain your other engagement. The thing is, no matter what we do, I think we should have a way for us to know if they're a citizen and not registered. I mean, I want to know that information. So I think another possibility would be to move number 1 down to the statement portion and just have a number that says, are you registered? If not, explain why not. Because I do think we should have the information. Either if it's via a modified minimum criterion or down below under the statement section.
Okay, I'm kind of like, I hear a couple things, and so I'm just going to summarize. I hear Commissioner Donaldson asking for number 1 to be kept as is. I am suggesting that we, and maybe this is somewhat aligned to Commissioner Jordanek, but I'm not sure if I understood correctly, is take what Commissioner Jung has recommended, which is to say register to vote, if not engage civically and electorally. However, I'm also hearing that maybe you would rather just take it off completely and have it in the statement component. So can you just clarify your position or thought?
Yeah, I'm okay with either of those options. The wording that you just suggested, I think, would be fine for under the criterion, or if we wanted to remove it as a criterion, I was suggesting we make it under a statement item. So either one is okay with me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that that's a good compromise, is to put it into the applicant's response. Are you registered to vote, or can you otherwise demonstrate your engagement in civic or cultural activities?
So the statement is actually more about the criteria would actually say register to vote. If not, you would have to kind of state your involvement.
Well, I think what Commissioner Jordanek was saying is take one and put it into the guidelines for applicants to respond.
Okay.
Is that correct, Commissioner Jordanek? That was your suggestion?
I was saying either one would be okay, but my second suggestion was to remove number one and then make an additional number under the statement section that says it's a checkbox, are you registered to vote? And if not, explain why not, so that we can have the information as to whether they're registered. And yeah.
So does this accommodate both Chris and Viva's concerns? So delete number one and add a question to say, please describe your civic and electoral engagement, including without limitation, whether you have registered to vote and consistently voted if eligible.
Yeah, I would prefer that than saying, why not? Why aren't you registered? I think that doesn't really solve the problem of us, whether or not you are engaged or not. So. So I can work, I'm okay with that recommendation.
Okay, so then I think we have an agreement. So I think we're striking, and so two becomes one in seriatim. So we're keeping former 2, former 3, former 4, former 5, former 6. And remind me, where did people shake out? Do we want to strike former 7?
Yes, strike former 7.
Okay. Striking that and then keeping 8 stet. So then we have 6 criteria, and then and added in the description or in the written section, we'd ask people to demonstrate their civic and electoral engagement, including without limitation, whether they have, if eligible, registered to vote and consistently voted.
Yes.
Okay. Is that clear enough for the record to be a motion? President Mogi?
It's clear to me. So.
Okay, I make that motion.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Donaldson. Before we take a vote, let's actually take public comment on this item.
Okay, if there are any callers on the line, you have 3 minutes to make a comment. You have to press *3 to do so. There are no callers on the line?
I'm sorry, one just popped up.
Okay, thank you.
Caller, you have 3 minutes.
Was this about, just for clarification, was this about the redistricting task force still, or are we moving on?
We are still on redistricting task force.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Oh, I got a few comments about redistricting. As a Michigander, my beloved state of Michigan recently, 2 years ago, approved redistricting at the state level, and I found it to be very, very. Hopefully, it will be very improving of our districting, since gerrymandering has completely ruined our entire state when it comes to a political nature. So I think one of the really good ideas from the whole concept was that they create the way they created the board was to have a specific amount of people in parties and not in parties. So they had 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 5 independents. And I thought that was an interesting idea. So I leave it to the commission here to go on that suggestion. And I don't know, I'm not trying to say that needs to be a requirement for criteria, but I believe that would be a good mixture of citizens, because I'm sure there's Republicans in this whole city to fill in that position. That would allow for a more even redistricting over the next 10 years. I would recommend looking into parts of that law if there is something that could be applied, because I think it was a pretty well thought out law, the Prop 2 that we passed. So that's just my recommendation. So I'm going to yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none. Public comment is closed. Can we take a roll call vote, please, Secretary?
Sure. Okay, so a motion has been made and seconded, and I will now call roll. President Mogi,
Yes.
Vice President Bernholz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Jung,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordanic,
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Donaldson, there we go. I thought I'd already said that. I apologize.
Not a
Commissioner
problem.
Donaldson.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So with 6 votes in the affirmative and 0 votes opposed, the motion is approved and carried unanimously with the commissioners. I'm sorry, with the commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, commissioners, for working through this. And it is suggesting from Commissioner Rowe that we select 1 commission member to draft guidelines for applicants. Can we have a volunteer to do that by the next meeting? If not, I may tell someone.
Volunteer.
I am unable to do so for health reasons. Otherwise, I would.
Mogi, I'll do it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Donaldson. Yep.
Thank
If there
you.
were an applause button on this, I would press it.
Oh, look at this, hand applause. Yes, everyone. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you, Commissioner Rowe, for drafting this. And we'll move on to the next November meeting one. But for now, let's kind of move on with the agenda. And if there are no other comments from the commissioners, we will move on to.
And President Mogi, if I could ask, I have a child care issue that's popped up. If there are any voting matters, I wonder, would it be possible to prioritize those? If not, don't worry about it, but I just thought I'd raise that.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to review just the evaluation process, but it will just be the process. And so I don't think we will have a voting matter around this. So I don't see anything, but I understand if you have to get going. Yeah, that's fine. And then I don't think we have any other voting items today. Okay. So with that, I will close we will move on to item number 5, Commissioners report. Commissioners report on topics not covered by another item on this agenda. Meeting with public officials, oversight and observation activities, long range planning for commission activities and areas of study, proposed legislation which affects elections. Anyone with some commissioner reports? Commissioner Bernholtz?
Thank you. And I'm going to share my screen just to show earlier today, actually, and not in time to get on the agenda, I met with some of the designers and consultants who are working with the Center for Tech and Civic Life project, which is the national program you may have heard of that's been coordinating a significant amount of philanthropic money for election security and protection issues. It's received quite a bit of press. And what I wanted to share with you, this was provided to me by one of the consultants working to that, with that program, were 2 documents that have been created. Make sure you can see the right thing. I'm not sure you're seeing the right thing. Hold on. Yes, so this is a framework to understand possible disturbances. How do you close this thing? At the polls. This is in draft form, but it's intended to be included in poll worker training and actually, I believe, made available to poll workers at the polls should there be any sort of disruption. And then the other document they shared with me, excuse me, is I'm not sure you're seeing the right one here. This is actually modeled on San Francisco. They used us as the example as of October 18th, an example for election administrators on orienting first-time poll workers. So I informed them that I believed most of the poll worker training had already been completed. I will share these with the secretary and the commissioners by email. I apologize, I didn't have them in time to put them on the agenda, but if they are of interest to the commission and or the director in the department, more than happy to make that connection as they're eager to be of use. And that's the report.
Commissioner Bernholtz, can you clarify the intended audience for these materials? Is it voters?
No. The first one that I showed, the one that was multicolored, the draft disruptions framework, is for poll workers and department staff. And the first one, the second one, I'm sorry, the people at the polls is for, there is a section on it that is directed toward voters, but it's primarily, the categories include voter, election worker, poll worker, election observer, journalist, electioneer, or police.
Okay. Are there, I guess, yes, in San Francisco, of course, the training for poll workers covers these things, and for inspectors and for clerks, I believe. But it's interesting that they felt the need to put these out, which makes me think that there's jurisdictions that don't.
Well, I think in particular, the first one, the disruptions at the poll, has, you couldn't see it obviously on the screen share, but it has a set of disruptions that luckily has not been of great concern in 200 and some odd years of American history, like armed volunteer poll monitors. As a possible situation, not something that has been, so in answer to your question, yes, these are being prepared for national use, so jurisdictionally quite varied. The types of disruptions, they are intended to cover a significantly broader spectrum of potential disruptions than I imagine many electoral districts have prepared for. And as for the one about training poll workers and all of those different roles and responsibilities, especially given the number of last minute state level changes that are being made, not so much here in California, but in other states, it's intended to be an easily and readily updatable document that can keep track of changing, court decisions and legislative moves regarding election integrity and things like that, which are happening in By my knowledge, well more than half a dozen states as we speak, still changing the rules. So
Yeah.
that's their intention. And San Francisco was probably the jurisdiction used as an example because the designer is based here.
Got it. And what was the group again? The organization?
It's the Center for Civic Tech, and I just had their name pulled up, for Tech and Civic Life, which has been administering upwards of $500 million in philanthropic funds to jurisdictions around the country for basic election protection services.
Great.
And that you'll recall that the House HEROES Act included $3.3 billion for this, but that act has never been passed by the Senate and has been sitting in Washington since Memorial Day. So there is still not adequate federal funding for the election needs.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernholtz. Are there any other commissioner reports?
I'll just mention, this is Commissioner Donaldson, that I have been interestingly working on a document of disruption scenarios in 3 particular states that have very late requirements for when they can start processing vote by mail ballots, and will probably end up processing far beyond the election day. That document is not quite complete, but I can send that out to through various channels, and I'd like to talk to you about that, Commissioner Bernholtz, offline. I also am an observer for the San Francisco election on November 3rd.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, let's move on to public comment for this item.
Are there any callers on the line for this item?
We have no callers queued. If they want to queue up, they'd hit *3 on their phone. It appears we don't have any.
Okay, public comment is closed. We'll move on to the next item, director's report. It's in our agenda packet. Director Arns, thank you so much for your patience as we work through other non-urgent election-related items, but we have, as you know, our commission, we do require some planning. So I know it's a really busy day for you, busy month for you, but thank you so much for joining us. And do you have any comments on your report?
Yeah, thank you, President Mogi. Just not on a report, just to give an update on the election. So far, we've received 163,000 votes for this election, and 135,000 of those votes have been cast by mail. So about 85% of the ballots have come back to us have been through the USPS. The turnout right now is at 31%, which is really good for this point in an election cycle. So everyone wants to know how this election compares to 2016. They're very different elections because not everyone received a ballot in 2016. Also, the processing rules and timelines were different in 2016 than they are now. But as far as turnout is concerned, this is the highest turnout that I've seen, and probably the highest turnout the city has seen at this point in the election cycle. The voting center, the real marker though for this election is 2008, the presidential election in 2008, and the voting center, the early voting, were about 600 votes lower early voting compared to 2008. We had 3,700 in 08, and we have 3,100 now. That, to me, that's really a good marker of what turnout's going to be for this election, more so than the vote by mail returns. We've had quite a few ballots dropped off here at the Civic Center Plaza at our outdoor voting center. We've got about 25,000 ballots dropped off. And yeah, so it's been a good flow, and hopefully it'll continue, and nothing really to report as far as any outstanding issues. We're just moving through time and getting things prepared for the election. So I can take any questions on a reporter about the election.
Yeah, before we move on to questions, I do want to say thank you so much. We've worked a lot, or I've also been kind of overwhelmed with the number of emails I've been getting, and every time I do, you and your team have been so responsive.
Thank you.
I've received so many great feedback, like the everyone's loving the text that is coming from the state, and then also it's kind of funny. I think the response has been like, does it happen where the department then lets the state know? Because they say SF Department of Elections is responding, and it's coming from the state text system. And so I don't know logistically how that works, but anyways, like everyone has been just saying, like, have been very excited to not only share that they're voting, but then also sharing about the text messaging. So hopefully that feature will continue on even after this election, because I think that is unfortunately going to be a concern whether or not their ballot will be counted. And so all of that said, I think that I've received so many great feedback from people, and I wanted to just thank you for that. And then before I go into questions, I want the commission to see if they have any questions on the director's report. Commissioner Jordanek?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've got a few questions here, and I'll just try to run through them. For starters, with respect to the grants that Vice President Bernholtz discussed earlier, did you think about applying for that grant at all?
Yeah, we did, and we received the check as well. We have to still go through the board to get the accept and expend resolution approved. But the grant is for new expenditures; it's not for reimbursements. So we've identified expenditures that we were making with this grant in mind, and we'll put that into the resolution we put forward to the board.
What is the amount, and what would it be for?
I think the amount was $845,000. A lot of it will go towards the voting center, but also the extra drop-off stations that we have, personnel for the drop-off stations, more outreach that we're doing to especially areas where there's lower turnout than the citywide average, usually. SROs, we're doing more outreach to the SROs in San Francisco. So those are like the main items right there that we're using the funds for.
Okay, well, that's a lot of money. It's impressive. My next question is, I've been kind of looking on Twitter, and have there been more mail delays than usual, given everything that's been happening, or is it the same from what you've seen?
I think it's better. I think we've received less calls about mail this election than we have in past elections.
Okay. And with respect to the drop-off boxes, did you make any changes to your plans on that, or are your current processes what you had decided on earlier?
No, so we'll expand out to every district to have a drop-off station starting October 31st. So the weekend before, Saturday before Election Day, we'll have a drop-off station in each gubernatorial district. So in addition to the 4, including the Civic Center drop-off, so we'll have 12 for this election.
Was that a change that you made in response to feedback, or had you always been planning to do that?
That was in response to feedback that we received.
Okay. All right, and then one more question: the drop boxes. Is there for the City Hall one? Is there an option for people to drop off their ballot, like a drive-through option?
Yeah. So for the last 10 days, we've had a drive-through option here at City Hall.
Okay. And one issue is I had discussed with you on email. There was a issue where I guess some of the department email is getting flagged as spam by Gmail, and I was wondering if you thought about if you're going to be doing anything on that before the election or not.
So we don't have any mass emailings scheduled for the election going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, but we looked at the configurations and we tested it with the vendors prior to issuing them. And I think on the city side, there was a change in configuration. We thought it was Google, but it ended up being on the city. Then you were on the email chain, I believe. So you know that the city was working on the configurations with the department. So we've been working on this. So now the configurations seem like they would be better, but again, and we'll test it if we were to issue more emails, but again, the configurations could change.
I see. And then my last question is, I actually meant to ask you about this at a previous meeting, but I don't know if any of the other commissioners have seen it, but there were a couple articles in the San Francisco Examiner about related to car rentals used throughout the city. And I guess the Board of Supervisors has been taking a look. I think one of the budget committees or auditing offices in the city found that some departments are spending a lot of money on car rentals. And the Department of Elections was one of the departments that Supervisor Yee had been quoted in these articles. It said that, I mean, are you familiar with this report that was discussed?
Yeah, it's been over a month though since I've read it, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just kind of wanted to hear your side of the story, because I guess they were concerned that this is a waste of spending, and I guess there were even some luxury car rentals, but there was no kind of response from you in the article, and I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on it.
Well, we were never contacted about the report, and I was never contacted about the article, so I never had a chance to write any information during the time that the board's budget analyst was drafting its report. We don't use luxury vehicles, but if we rent vans to pick up, usually for the sheriffs to pick up the ballots at polling places, but then also for the feds to drive around, provide support during election day. And if the rental agency doesn't have a van, they'll give us a different vehicle, and sometimes it'll be a large SUV, for instance, which is categorized as luxury. It's not what we're asking for, but that's what we're given because there's no van available. We provide the information to Supervisor Yee's office. Also, Supervisor Yee recommended that we work with the city to use more city vehicles. We did contact the city administrator's office, and due to COVID, we're actually able to use more city vehicles for this election because many departments aren't using those vehicles at the moment. But when we do an election cycle, most other departments are still using their vehicles, so we have to do rentals. All the rentals we make in the city are under the city's blanket-wide contract for rental vehicles, so we're not independently going out and renting vehicles on our own. This is under the contract the city has set with the vendor, so the costs are based on the city's negotiations with the car rental companies. But yeah, we use a lot of vehicles, certainly, but we don't use luxury ones, and we never had a chance to write information in response to those statements in the report. And I still have not been contacted actually by the board's budget analyst on this.
Do you know if they're going to be, are they going to be requesting some kind of response from you, or I guess you're informally providing a response?
I've not been, yeah,
okay.
I responded to Supervisor President Yee's office. I provided him the information, so they haven't. Okay.
All right. Oh, well, thank you. Thanks a lot for your responses. So.
Director Arts, this is Commissioner Johnson. I had a couple of questions, and apologize for not being on last month on the election plan. I have two questions on that. The vote by mail ballot processing and the avoidance of the people voting conditionally, I thought was a great plan. But I just wanted to ask about the period of 24 hours before election day to process the vote by mail ballot envelopes and update the rosters. Just your thoughts on 24 hours being enough time to do that, and then also the processing of the returned rosters before you resume processing of vote by mail ballots.
Do I think it's enough time?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that. Do you have any concerns about that timing? I'm sure you thought about it a lot, but I think that was just something to me that it sounded like very tight timelines.
Yeah, they are. We'll scan the rosters as they come to us at the warehouse on election night when the sheriff's deputies deliver them. So usually we wait till the next morning when the rosters are shipped to City Hall from the warehouse. Then now we'll actually scan them at the warehouse. Then we can just bring the information over to City Hall for verification, and we can start the verification process that night as well. So no, we expect to have enough time to scan the rosters and do the verification of the information before uploading voter history from the polling places.
Okay. So at this point, then the only time you are going to have someone that votes provisionally, there'll be nobody voting provisionally if they are vote by mail, if they're marked as vote by mail, because everyone gets a ballot.
If we have information that someone returned their ballot already, then if someone goes to a polling place and wants to vote again, we will give them a ballot, but they'll vote provisionally. Then it will not count that provisional ballot.
So the rosters that will be received at the polling place will be marked as a vote by mail ballot processed already.
Correct.
Got it. And so, and my understanding of the processing of those vote by mail envelopes is it's gonna stop 24 hours before. So you're gonna print the rosters just 24 hours before.
No, we'll start printing the rosters next week, but then the day before election day, we always provide, in the past, it was the labeled eligible list, which we don't have to issue that because of the conditional voter registration. Now we'll provide a list of voters who've voted their vote by mail ballots. Then we'll print those out, and then the feds can bring those to the precincts on election morning.
I see. So it's going to be a supplemental roster supplement.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that. One other question, just informational for me, is that when you are processing the signatures in the envelope processing signature validation, is that connect directly to the state database, or do you have a local database of the signature cards?
The signatures for each county are stored locally. Okay. But then when the ballots are accepted, then that information is uploaded to the statewide registration database.
Got it. Okay. Final question I had was on observation of the vote by mail operation at City Hall and at Bill Graham Civic. What are the hours of operation, and can people observe in person at any time, or is the observation only going to be remote?
Well, the hours now, it's mostly 8 to 6 or so. People can come and observe in person, but they can also watch the streaming, the web streaming that's on our website of the operation as well.
And will it be open for observation, obviously remotely, but in person for through all hours of operation? Because I assume post-election it's going to be, of course, extended hours.
Yeah, everything we do is open to public observation. So whenever we're running any of the operations or activities, people can come and observe.
Great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? I just had one brief question. The poll workers, it seems like how many do we actually need? I thought to be able to conduct on election day.
Oh, for this election, we need around 2,800.
So I noticed that you've recruited 5,000, 3,500 have already done the training in your report. Are you going to just turn away some folks? Like, what's going to be that process? I know we never really had these kind of problems, but I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, so we'll have to inform people that we cannot process their application or move them further in the process, such as training. So we have enough people to staff the polling places. Right now, we're worried about people not taking the training or canceling on us. So the numbers are going to drop as far as the number of total people available to work at the polls. What we still need are about 100 people who are bilingual Chinese. So we're still recruiting that group of people to work at the polling places.
Okay. And so you're just going to notify some people that there'll likely be people that you will notify that you will not be needing.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll do that closer. I mean, it would probably be closer to election day because now's the time when we get to cancel elections, and also people don't like their assignments. They don't want to go to one part of the town versus another, or, So then we also have a standby pool that we're trying to establish for election day, and so we have like 100 or so standby poll workers, and they're also canceling on us. So that 3,500 number is good, but it's going to decrease on us. But no, we're not going to need the full 5,000 people to be poll workers for this election.
And you'll notify them. I'm just asking just because I've heard some people be like, oh, I haven't heard back. When will I hear back? And so I just want to make sure that if they did apply, regardless of even if they went through the training, that they'll just get some kind of response saying, from the department directly.
Everyone who's applied ought to have received a notification from us that acknowledged their application or they're wanting to apply. So if someone has not, then let us know. We can contact them. But then yes, after we get closer to election day, we know where we stand. We got a better sense. We will contact the remaining people, let them know that they will not be working as poll workers on election day.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Commissioner Jordan, do you have more questions or no?
Yeah, I just had one more question that I thought of, and that is, Director Arns, based on the numbers that have been coming in so far, does it look like the election day in the polling place, it's going to be less traffic, or are people taking advantage of the early voting, or is it hard to say right now?
This election is different than other elections, so I really don't have reference from previous experience, but election day is going to be busy everywhere, even the polling places. You're still going to get 25 to 30% of the vote by mail ballots, I think, dropped off at polling places. So you're going to have that traffic. The registration number right now is 521,000, which is the highest in the city's history. But I still think that will get people coming to polling places to register to vote on election day. Then that would be more traffic at the polls. So yeah, the polls I think are still going to have potentially, at the lowest 30% of the turnout if you include the vote by mail ballots. Then if you start to extrapolate a little bit, I could see upwards of 35 to 40% of the turnout actually traveling to the polling places on election day, either to vote, to register and vote, or to drop off their vote by mail ballots.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, let's take public comment on this item. Is there any public comment?
Currently, there is nobody in the queue for public comment.
Okay. Seeing none, public comment is closed. Let's move on to item number 7, objectives and process for annual performance evaluation of Director of Elections, discussion and possible action regarding the preparation of objective and process of performance evaluation of the Director of Elections. I will preface with an apology. We are going to do our best, Director Arns, to do this evaluation without having you to do the self-evaluation by the next meeting. And so I wanted to say that to the commission, and unfortunately we will need to still do it. So likely by the December meeting, I'm hoping that we can probably go through that. But let's, there are some attachments. There is a rubric that I sent out of how it was done last time around, and then also the evaluation, the evaluation criteria, and also the additionally we will have a self-evaluation component. So today I wanted to talk through the process of what we would like to do, and some key deadlines. I unfortunately did not prepare this well enough, like Commissioner Rowe, with a memo. I apologize for that, but I did my best. Okay, so do folks have any? We've spent a lot of time. I was obviously here towards the tail end of this of fixing the evaluation, and then how we are going to evaluate the director. I was in the end okay with the last process, but if there are changes to that or comments to that, then I would love to hear that now, or recommendations that you would like to see differently. None. I don't know if Commissioner Bernholtz, you were on the commission during that time. Oh, you were kind of here towards the tail end of it so you did go through the actual evaluation. I do recall.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I don't see anyone else. I think you and I are probably the newer ones on the commission. And so my suggestion will be that I guess my question, and this might be to Deputy City Attorney, is that is it okay to do, or maybe I ask the rest of the commission, is it okay to do our evaluation and the self-evaluation at the same time? Because I know we've always received the self-evaluation first and then did the evaluation, but I'm just being extremely mindful of Director Arndt's time, especially during the election season, to not having to have him to do this during while he's trying to run one of the biggest election that we've had. So
Yeah, I think the commission has some flexibility about the evaluations. I don't know if the intention of the discussion at this point is to talk about the criteria as well, or did you want to talk about the sequencing first?
I did ask the commission just now if they had any changes that they want, and I didn't see any comments, so I made an assumption, but
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't clear on that. Okay.
So then I've moved on to talking about the process.
Okay.
So my recommendation to the commission is that we would do our evaluation and have Director Arntz do his self-evaluation and actually discuss this not at the November meeting, but at the December meeting. But the challenge with the December meeting is that we usually take December off just because third Wednesday is a bit of a challenge. So I'm trying to be understanding and still try to get this done. And so I'm wondering how that's where I think I kind of got stuck in making my recommendation. To be honest, is like timing wise, how can we, have this done and not require it by the next elections commission meeting?
Is that a question to the rest of the commissioners, or is
Yes,
that
that is a question, because I assume I'm just making a bunch of assumptions. Like I assume we're not going to want to meet in December. I assume, or maybe we do have to. I don't know. So I'm just making a bunch of assumptions, and I would love some support from the rest of the commission of how we want to go about this.
what would the date for the December meeting be? It's the 23rd. Yeah, that's going to be hard. Christmas Eve.
Yeah, Commissioner Rowe.
I don't recall us ever actually getting to Director Arntz's review in the same calendar year. We've always been late. So I think if we even did it in January, we'd probably be ahead of past performance. And I don't think that's a problem unless Mr. Shen tells us that it is. But I would recommend putting it off until January.
Yeah, I think the commission has some flexibility on timing, and I believe that the day of the December meeting would be the 16th. If
I was just going to say, I misread that. Thank you.
Okay, so if we are going to meet on the 16th, then which likely still be, I think, kind of like
cutting it,
socially like accepted date to still meet. Just because I feel like after the 20th, people get very, it's too challenging to try to schedule a meeting, but 16th might be okay. And Director Arntz, do you feel, knowing your schedule, feel comfortable filling out your self-eval by December 16th meeting?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. If that sounds all right, then that was mostly what I wanted to talk about, and then also talk about the criteria. But we've spent a lot of time on the criteria in the past, and so it seems like this process did feel okay last time around, even though we've had some hiccups. But are there thoughts from this commission? I just want to kind of circle back and check in one last time.
Just want to mention that what we did last time was we included the policy, commission policies as criteria, and I don't think we've added any that I recall in the last year. So I think that the criteria as they stand would be the same criteria.
Yes.
And I was just going to say that the documents appear slightly different, and I don't know if that indicates a different process or made nice boxes at the top. Did you have a chance to review this with DHR at all, President Mogi? Or the content looks the same, but I don't know if the process is different.
I actually did not take I was just looped in with the conversation to make sure that we have the most updated material. And so I don't know if they've changed the process. I can follow up on that.
Yeah, President Mogi, I'm also happy to help out, reach out to DHR about that to see if there's any serious changes. But I think we just asked for the most updated form of the template, the most updated version.
Okay.
Commissioner Rowe?
Yeah, I'll just first say, I think this looks a little bit different because this is the one that goes to the director as opposed to the one that we filled out, but it is the same information. And so I will make a motion that we use these criteria again for this year's performance review, and that each commissioner complete an evaluation and the director be requested to complete a self-evaluation for consideration by the commission at the December commission meeting.
Is there a second?
Just to clarify, so by the December meeting, the motion is to use these criteria and to get back the self-evaluation. It's not for us to do our evaluation. Is that correct?
No, both would need to be done so that we can discuss our own evaluations, and the director's self-evaluation at the December meeting.
Thank you. I second.
Thank you. Any questions to this? I will send the right form to everyone. That is one thing I will do. I'm sorry that it's the same, but yeah, I understand. One's for the director and one's for the commission. I'll make sure the right ones get sent to you.
And just a point of clarification then, does that mean by December 13th or in advance of that meeting, we would receive the director's review and we would share ours with each other? Or are we going to, when do we actually need these done by for discussion on December 16th?
Yeah, I would recommend those dates then, if it's helpful for a deadline. I know that some people will likely send it out through the weekend, but maybe, oh yeah, that the 13th would be a Sunday. So yeah. Commissioner.
Yeah, in the past, what we've done is set a deadline and have one commissioner receive all of the evaluations and compile a brief summary of the combined evaluation and submit that to the full commission prior to the meeting. I'm sorry if I'm yelling. I'm just trying to make sure you can hear me. So what I would suggest is we get public comment and vote on that motion, and then select a commissioner who's willing to compile and summarize the evaluations, and then that commissioner can set a deadline, probably going to be something like December 1st for the commissioner. And then Director Arntz's can come later, but ours probably needs to come a little bit earlier so that they can be summarized.
Yeah, that's a concern though, right? Couldn't we get the director's self-evaluation before to include in our consideration or our evaluation?
I think that's was my recommendation this time around, is that we would just do our evaluation without taking in the director's consideration, self-eval at this time.
I see. And that was my understanding of the original motion. I'm sorry.
The motion that was provided by Commissioner Rowe was to actually have, for us to have discussion on both for our evaluation that we have given to the director, and then.
Thank you for the clarification. So this would be, we would have both side by side to consider at the December 16th meeting.
Yes.
Got it.
Commissioner Jordanek.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, and I'm sorry if you already clarified this, but there were 3 documents on the packet, and are we just only really talking about the one that we made for the purposes of the motion?
Yes.
Okay, so the 2 with the colored boxes we can ignore right now?
Yeah, Deputy City Attorney, that's the one that was sent by Michael, correct?
Yes, but I'm happy to confirm. I think we just only had time to exchange documents quickly, and I can talk to Mike a little bit more about the process to get confirmation.
So Director Arntz is he's going to be filling out his self-evaluation based on the document we put together. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I got it.
If there are no other questions, I'm going to move on to public comment on this item.
I do have one other comment. I'm sorry. The part of this is also plans going forward. I don't think we had an emphasis on that, the strategic plan piece. So this time we are asking for that piece as well, right? Self-evaluation and plan.
Okay, I'm gonna need a little bit of help.
What we had said last year was that we were going to put down some sort of think about what we wanted in the next year, some criteria. So if we're meeting to just compare this last year in December, I'm fine with that. I just wanted to clarify that. Are we asking Director Arntz just for an evaluation of the last year? First question, plus the look at the year ahead, or just the last year? Because it does say strategic plan here. So I presume we're asking for that as well, correct?
Commissioner Rowe.
I think we can leave that within the item 6 overall, which asks him what areas he can improve and what steps he'll take to improve.
Okay. I'm looking at the 2021 doc and I just see the strategic plan attached section.
Well, that's what I was asking about.
I think you're looking at the document that Mr. Shen just said came from DHR. That was not has not been part of our process in the past. And I think we're talking about the first page and not the ones with the color on them. So I think Commissioner Donaldson, you're looking at the ones with the cover on them, which are things that DHR gives separately for its process. which Mr. Shen just said he was going to look into, but we don't really know where that came from right now.
Okay, got it. So I'm okay with the timeline. I think we should review this and make sure that we're all clear at next month's meeting based on any direction from DHR. That's not a modification of the motion. I'm just suggesting we stick with that timeline, but what we're actually asking for in terms of documents and our feedback, we should clarify at the November meeting.
Yeah, and again, I'm happy to follow up on that and provide more direction and clarification to the commission.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's take public comment on this item and the motion.
Can I start with the motion?
No, we're taking public comment on it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We have nobody in the queue for public comment.
Okay. Public comment is closed. Let's take roll call, please.
Okay. President Mogi,
Yes.
Vice President Bernholz,
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Jung. Commissioner Jung?
I believe he had to leave for a personal matter.
That okay. I apologize. And then Commissioner Jordanic.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 5 affirmative votes and one is an excuse, had to leave early vote. So the motion carries.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's just in the future, it will just be the 5 votes, whoever is present. So we don't have to mention the excuse vote.
Okay, thank you.
So you had the right count.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Oh, before we move on, I think we have to assign somebody. With the evaluation component, knowing it is a heavy lift, but I'm happy to take that on with the deadline of December. Let me actually look at the calendar. I would appreciate, like what Commissioner Rose said, maybe December 1st, if folks can send that to me. Since we are not running a full-blown election, I hope that gives you enough time. It's October 21. And so if we can do that, then I'm happy to take that on and summarize and submit it and also be the one to send out the right evaluation form and follow up with Deputy City Attorney Shen.
Thank you, President Moon.
If that's all right, then let's not forget. And then Secretary, if we can have we'll work on sending reminders to the commission so I can get them in time by December 1st. And so I'll have enough time to summarize and send it to the rest of the commission for the December meeting.
Set reminders. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, great. So let's move on to the last item number 8, agenda items for future meeting discussion and possible action regarding items for future agendas. We will be reviewing, oh my gosh, I totally blanked. Oh, Commissioner Donaldson will be following up on the criterias, the guidelines with the redistricting task force in the November meeting. I will be the one following up on the December meeting with the evaluation. And then are there any other items that you would like to discuss outside of those 2?
I have not looked at, I don't recall the calendar. We will not have certified results this one. But I think that it would be worth having something on for any particularly public feedback on the election.
Sure. We can, I don't think, I assume it'll be too soon for the November election, but it would be great to have a feedback kind of initial kind of response, Director Arns, from the November election. I know a lot of people will be eager. I'm sure you'll actually be announcing it more publicly before we even meet for the meeting, but if that's possible. Great, thank you. Any other items? Commissioner Rowe, is that just hand is just up for from the last time? Okay, great. We'll take public comment on item number 8 for future items.
There appears to be no public comment.
Okay, public comment is closed. Dr. Arns, good luck. And Commissioner Donaldson, thank you for being an observer. And yeah, if there are no other comments, meeting is adjourned at 5:24 p.m. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you all.